Jaron Jarvis Channel, Top 20 Scary Stories of the Day from Reddit nosleep. 2018-09-14. Story 1, Hello, I'm the guy behind the coffee machine. Can we talk? I need to talk. By behind the coffee machine I mean that I am stuck in a vending machine, that's why I need to talk. I'll start at the beginning. I was your usual barista. I was your minimum wage servant for all your coffee needs, the proud flag bearer of caffeinated capitalism, wearing my franchise-colored t-shirt, cap and apron. I was the one who brought you your caffeine shots before your finals, your iced drink for your date, your pint of cappuccino before your board meeting. I was the one who tried to sell you snacks when you just wanted a drink and drinks when you just wanted a snack. I was the one who knew that the tea we serve is not only delicious, but actually cheap in bulks. It's expensive because no one buys tea in a coffee shop. I was the one who knew that the back, as in, you're out of vanilla syrup. Did you check in the back? Is 20 feet square of cardboard boxes, 2 fridges and some bottles gathering up dust, ingredients of a seasonal drink recipe that no one bought. And that yes, we were actually out of vanilla syrup. I was the one who had to explain that yes, almond milk comes from actual almonds, and that your black espresso has very, very low chances of containing gluten. I kind of hated that job, if you haven't noticed. I hated that I had to smile, I hated that I had to be polite or else, I hated that even on my days off I smelt like rancid milk, I hated that every day I had to deal with the cold, mathematical truth that half the people I served were dumber than the average human being. It feels good to write it out. If I manage to get out of where I am right now I'm staying away from Restauración for the rest of my life. Now I am still a barista, sort of. I make coffee, that's for sure. But it feels good to vent. On a fine morning, I can't tell you when, I was in my car, going to work. I spent the commute the same way I spent most of my morning commutes, grumbling internally. Every morning, like clockwork, brooding, already tired of the day to come, pushing on the gas pedal proportionately with how cranky I felt, getting occasional speeding tickets. I'd been thinking about applying elsewhere lately, putting my 2 weeks in. Or just taking a break. Take a good old road trip somewhere. I'd always wanted to see the Yellowstone National Park. Or closer to where I lived, a little trek through the wild areas in the north of the state. I longed for fresh air, basically. I went exactly nowhere that morning. At an intersection I drove straight into a fast food delivery truck, my car accordioned and I was crushed to death on the spot. Or so I though. I woke up in a box. It was pitch black. Is this what it's like to be dead? I thought. Huh. Things were crawling on me. I really hoped my consciousness would fade away before the maggots took over. I blinked. I tried to move. My body made crunchy noises. Most of my bones were broken. But I could move. I tried to utter a sound. Nothing came out. My jaw had been crushed into little bits. My vocal cords were gone too. Something was weird. I didn't feel like I was lying down. It didn't feel like a coffin. I was sitting on a chair? Stool? And it wasn't pitch black. My eyes were getting used to the darkness. I could move, I had eyes, good news, all things considered. There were small red lights on a wall that was very close to me. It looked like I was sitting in a very small, very crowded closet. I heard a clang outside. The rumor of a crowd. Then light came through a vertical hole at hand's reach in front of me. I could see a marble-tiled floor through it. I looked around the closet. I still had, and I still have the clothes I dyed, for lack of a better word, in. My phone was in my back pocket. I tried to reach for it. That's when I noticed. Those weren't maggots I felt crawling on me. It was ants. Lots and lots of ants, everywhere. On the dirty, sticky floor, cockroaches. Swarming in splotches of gooey-looking liquid that smelt like cheap sugary coffee gone bad. On both my sides were a tangle of metal pipes. Hot water, a tag said. In front of me, a faucet. Above the faucet, bags of powder. black, brown, white, yellowish, greenish. Tagged as coffee, cocoa, milk, sugar, artificial hazelnut flavoring green mint tea. Ants all over, grapes of ants, mostly covering the sugar and cocoa bag, obviously enjoying themselves. I could move, but I barely had enough place for it. Besides the pipes that took up significant space, piles and piles of plastic coffee cups, bags of plastic stirrers were crammed everywhere up to the ceiling. I heard footsteps. I saw a pair of business shoes through the hole. I heard the distinct shilling of a coin in an automatic machine. The closet started to shake, tremble. Steam shot up from the pipes filling up with boiling hot water. A bright white light above my head blinked aggressively at me. Cappuccino, it said. Under, a smaller yellow light, no sugar. I still don't know how I ended up here, or what I did to deserve this. I wonder every day if this is barista hell. But there is one thing I knew at that moment, regardless of how absurd the situation was, I knew how to make coffee. I grabbed a dirty, old bugs-ridden plastic spoon from one of the bags, and a plastic cup. I put 2 spoonfuls of dehydrated coffee, 2 spoonfuls of dehydrated milk, poured hot water over that, sprinkled a bit of what I hoped was mostly cocoa and not mostly ants. Then I crossed my fingers and dropped the drink into the hole. At the last moment I remembered to throw a plastic stirrer in. The machine went ding. "Your beverage is ready," a voice said. "Enjoy your drink." A hand took the cup. Feet walked away. This is my life now. I am stuck in a vending machine. Sorry for the ambiguous title. By behind the coffee machine I mean that I am the one making it work. My phone survived the crash. My phone subscription was cancelled when I died. But whatever building I am in has free Wi-Fi. It allowed me to post here. I apparently don't need to sleep anymore, don't need to eat, but it would be nice if someone could rescue me. So next time you grab a coffee in a train station or something, if you could, maybe, knock once or twice on the machine, that would be nice. I'll knock back, you'll call security, and we'll see from here. Thanks in advance. If you've been an instant coffee enthusiast before, look at the bright side, that's what you've been drinking all along and you're not dead. That said, now you'll know that if you see small black lumps at the bottom of your machine-provided latte, it's probably not coffee grounds. Story 2, Big Old Titties. My name is Dolly and I need your help. There's a group of men chasing me and it's all because of my big old titties. Let's go back a few years, to when I was a flat-chested high schooler. No one paid much attention to me or my friend Jane because of our situation. By the end of junior year, all the other girls had developed into B and even C cups, while Jane and I were barely rocking an A that summer. I finally got out of buttfuck Iowa, place names changed for anonymity, on a European vacation with my family. I wanted to come back more worldly and interesting. I even picked up a beret and glasses in France so I could get a reputation as classy and mysterious. I remember my first day back at school senior year. I had brought a packet of clove cigarettes to school so I could smoke them mysteriously during lunch break and cement my new image. I never got the chance. I had the first clove in my mouth and the shiny new Zippo lighter in my right hand. I sparked it up and lit the tip of the clove, but before I could take the first puff I caught sight of her. The cigarette fell from my lips as my jaw dropped open. Jane was standing in the middle of a group of cute boys. They were fawning all over her, Jane and her big old titties. What the fuck? They had to be the biggest titties in school. Easily an F cup, maybe a G, and on her tiny, 5 feet 2 inches frame, they made her look like a porn star. I stormed over to Jane and grabbed her arm. "Jane. I missed you. Girl, emergency in the bathroom." I tried pulling her away, but she resisted. "Dolly, can't we talk later?" she asked. "Nope," I said. "We need to talk right now." I dragged Jane to the bathroom as the boys behind her whistled. Luckily no one else was there so I didn't have to whisper. "Holy cow," I said at her boobs. "Where did you get those?" "I don't know, they just kind of appeared. I haven't done anything different except..." "Except what?" I growled. "Well, Mom's been buying this milk from the farm down the road from us. It's all natural and organic and stuff. She says it's better to drink milk close to the source, you know, rather than getting it at Walmart. What's the name of the farm? I asked her. Mammary Fields, Jane said, yanking the door open. Now let me go. Jimmy wants to feel me up under the bleachers. That night I made my case to my mom. We had all finished eating and I stayed after to help her clean up. So Mom, you know that milk from Walmart causes cancer? What? Mom said, where did you hear that? Science class. It also has a ton of antibiotics and antihistamines. I mean, what does pasteurized even mean? Do you know? Mom was about to answer, but I cut her off. It's also ruining the environment. I mean, they have to truck that stuff in from Canada or Puerto Rico. What do you want, Dolly? She said. Good, that meant she was playing ball. I just think the responsible thing to do is to buy our milk from Mammary Fields, I said. I could see Mom thinking. It's just down the road, so it's local and organic and cage-free. Mom shrugged. Sure, I guess, she said. But why do you care so much about milk all of a sudden? Mom, you know you're never too young to take your health seriously, I said. The very next day I was chugging Mammary Fields milk like an alcoholic back off the wagon. I didn't see much of Jane, but I figured she was off somewhere getting her toes sucked or whatever you do when boys pay attention to you. A few weeks later I saw her in the hallway and pulled her aside. Hey girl, I said. Got milk? Because I do. I held up a small carton of Mammary Fields 2%. Jane rolled her eyes. So when does this shit start working? Hey, is that a hickey on your neck? Get off me. God, Dolly. So, I dunno, took me maybe a month before I noticed a difference. Shit. Jane was looking down at her shirt. There was a wet spot over her left boob. Not again, she said and stormed off towards the restroom. Little did I know, that was the last time I would see Jane, or her big old titties. The next day Jane wasn't in class. She wasn't there the day after either. All the boys who had been spending time with her were pulled aside and questioned by the principal. The line stretched halfway down the hallway. Lucky bitch. I upped my milk intake. I was drinking about half a gallon a day at this point. Mom was making weekly trips to Mammary Fields, but she could barely keep it in the house. I was chugging it straight from the carton when a picture on the side caught my eye. I was so surprised I inhaled some milk straight into my lungs and spent the next minute coughing. When I recovered, I took a closer look at the picture. It was a black and white photo of Jane. She was looking straight into the camera with a pissed-off expression. She was wearing the same shirt she had worn the last time I had seen her. The picture could have been taken that afternoon, except that she was wearing a big earring on her left ear. I hadn't even known she had gotten her ears pierced. A single word was printed directly above her photo, in bold, uppercase letters. Missing. Damn, girl, I said. That earring looks terrible on you. I didn't have too much time to dwell on Jane because there had been some interesting new developments in my own life. That's right. The milk was finally working. I went from barely filling out a training bra to a C cup in a month. A month later I was popping out of a DD. As Shakespeare said, my cups runneth over. And I wasn't the only one who was noticing. It turns out, when your milkshake is made by Mammary Fields, it does, in fact, bring all the boys to the yard. The next few weeks were magical. Like my life was a Disney porno. 4 boys asked me to homecoming. 4 boys. I went with all of them. Life was great. Then one day in algebra I felt something weird. During passing time I went to the bathroom and noticed a small wet spot on my shirt. I went into a stall to investigate. My bra was wet in the same spot. What the hell? I dried it off as much as I could with a paper towel and went back to class. I was walking home from school listening to Drake when I heard the squeal of tires. A white van sped past, then careened up onto the curb in front of me. Nice driving, assholes. I yelled at them. The side door of the van slid open and 2 men got out. That's the target, said one of them. They both started running toward me. I spun around and tried to get away from them, but they were too fast. My last thought, before everything went black, was that I should have paid more attention in gym class. I woke up in a room the size of a jail cell with a pounding headache. My left ear felt like it was on fire. I sat up slowly and felt my ear carefully. A plastic tag hung down from it in a way I just knew was unattractive. "Son of a bitch," I yelled at the wall. A screen on the wall in front of me switched on, showing a video of a red barn surrounded by rolling hills. The hills looked familiar. "What the fuck?" I said. Cheesy music started to play as the camera zoomed in on the barn. A woman with big old titties stood in the door of the barn, chewing on a piece of hay. The music got louder and the woman looked right into the camera and said, "Welcome to Mammary Fields." "Well, I'll be damned," I said. Then the door to my cell burst open. A woman stood on the other side, holding a bucket in one hand. "Hello, Dolly," she said brightly, "it's time for your milking." The next 6 months were without doubt the most embarrassing of my entire life, up to this point. I won't tell you how I escaped Mammary Fields, except that it was undignified and involved a lot of chocolate. I have no doubt that Mammary Fields will come after me for writing this, so as soon as I post this I'm taking these big old titties and hitting the road. I just wanted to warn everyone before I go. Stay away from Mammary Fields. Better yet, stay away from Iowa altogether. There's no reason to go there. And my warning goes for the men out there too. You don't want to know what Mammary Fields milk does to you. Story 3, last night I realized I didn't know what to do when my paranoia became reality. I'm a really neurotic person. I feel it's necessary to explain exactly how stressed I can get about things in order for you to fully understand why I would have the fears I have. If I don't hear from a loved one for over an hour when they have gone on a drive, I begin to wonder what might have happened to them and what I should do should they be dead. If I can't find my dog, I begin to think about everything in the house that could possibly have injured or killed them. It's not healthy, but it's how my mind works. Now on top of this kind of worrying, I have 2 unrealistic fears that I can't shake. One is looking out a window at night and seeing something staring back. I've actually heard that's pretty common. My other fear is sleeping with my back to a door, because something wanting to do me harm could come through it. Because of this, whenever I try and lay that way, face my fears, I hear every little sound and picture some abomination entering my bedroom. Last night I was getting pissed off at myself. I began screaming at myself internally. Damn it, you're an adult. If you have kids one day, you'll need to protect them from their own fears, not maintain your own. I was determined to sleep with my back to the door and make it through the night. And maybe that's what led to the creature making it so far. I was wide awake trying desperately to keep my eyes shut and calm my mind. Of course I heard the sounds of knocking and creaking that generally get me to turn around. I refused. I squinted my eyes shut even tighter and started breathing loudly to cover the noise slightly. The longer this went on, the more new noises I heard. The footsteps that usually got me to look were louder than they ever had been. Closer. I thought I felt a slight shaking in time with them, like they were heavy enough to affect the tiny apartment. And then I heard my doorknob slowly turning. My first thought was obviously to turn around and see for myself. Then I realized that my mind was playing tricks on me to get me to do just that, and I didn't want to give up on fixing this particular fear of mine. But the sound continued. It was so slow, like someone who actually didn't want to wake me, so it continued long enough to fill me with dread. And then it came to a stop. I then heard a faint tap as if something was placed against the door gingerly, and I was expecting some creaking sound like out of a horror movie, but my door was so silent that if it were truly opening I wouldn't have heard it anyway. As my stress built, I decided that one look to calm my nerves would be fine as long as I went back to facing away from the door afterwards. So I turned, and I heard a dull thud like something falling to the floor. From my line of sight, I saw nothing. The door was open a good amount, but that could have been Domino, my dog, forcing his way in. I still felt uneasy though, and I decided to sit up and get a wider field of view. Maybe see what had fallen. and there it was, sitting on the floor with its knees pulled into its chest. It was human, but I couldn't tell if it was male or female. In the dim light coming in from the hallway, I could make out some features, such as its light grey skin tone, or its stringy hair that mostly ran down the back of its head. Despite its eyes appearing to be swollen shut, I could swear it was staring at me. It looked up with an almost curious expression, and I noticed that its lower jaw protruded out a bit, and it was slowly grinding its teeth back and forth. At the same time as this, I realized that the thud I had heard earlier was this creature dropping to the floor to avoid my line of sight. If I weren't so paranoid, its plan might have worked. I say plan, but it didn't appear too intelligent. More animalistic. I'm describing all of this from my initial viewing of the creature, because it is now seared into my mind. But the whole analysis didn't last very long before I found myself screaming in shock and terror at this manifestation of my most unrealistic fear come to life. As I screamed, the creature seemed to mimic me. It stopped grinding its teeth, sat up straight, and opened up its mouth to match my own. It let out a raspy scream that sounded more like a whisper, and it didn't let up until I did. It still wasn't moving any closer to me, so I began gathering more details about it, such as its clearly visible ribcage through its thin, sickly skin. Or how the only clothing it had was a pair of ripped, green pants. I remember this all so well because that was how we spent the entire night. We just stared at each other as it continued to grind its teeth, and I had to remind myself to breathe. As soon as sunlight began filtering its way in through my window, the creature made me jump as it jerked up onto its feet, as if pulled by strings, and then hobbled away. I waited in my bed for hours before finally building up the courage to leave my room, and I found no trace of anyone else visiting the apartment upon closer inspection. I can't be sure of this, but it seems like whatever that was only advanced on me when I didn't see it. Like I said, maybe that's why it got so far last night. But what truly scares me is that it most likely comes in every night once I fall asleep. If I'm right, then it doesn't actually mean harm. That doesn't make me any less scared to go back to sleep tonight, though. Edit: I wasn't intending for this to go on as a series of posts like other experiences on here, but it seems like people want to know more about whatever that was. Frankly, I do too, because I don't feel safe in my apartment. I'm thinking of trying something and I'll see how it works out. Story 4, The Lost and Found. It's been 2 weeks since my brother went missing from his apartment. No signs of forced entry, no evidence of a struggle, but that wasn't too much of a surprise. Although he holds his life together most of the time, my brother sometimes disappears for a day, or a weekend, or sometimes even longer. To be short, he's had some drug problems. So when his car, and his stuck-in-the-past Ren and Stimpy blanket vanished, it was more of a disappointment than a reason to call the 6 o'clock news. But after 8 days of no contact I started to get nervous, so my girlfriend and I stopped over to his apartment. He adopted a cat a week before he went missing, and we figured we didn't want to let it suffer alone in his apartment. So we brought it to our place, food bowl, litter box and all. This is a new low. Running away after he just gets a cat. My girlfriend and I were honestly excited to be taking care of the cat until my brother got back. So we felt terrible leaving her alone the first night we got her, but we had made plans a month ago to go out to dinner with some friends, and we had cancelled last time and yada yada. Anyway, the dinner was fun and we stayed until the restaurant closed along with everything else in our small town at 11 p.m. I know, we live out in the boonies. So we get home and we are greeted by our adorable house guest and the less adorable scent of urine. I run into our bedroom to find yellow spots covering our bed. The blankets don't fit in our washer. Our apartment is pretty small, and so is the washer/dryer unit. We normally have to take the blankets to the laundromat down the street to clean them, but it was almost midnight at this point and it had been closed for hours. We cannot let these sit overnight. So I googled and Yelped and found a 24-hour laundromat that was in the next town over, about 35 minutes away. We packed up the formerly white comforter and sheets and hit the road. I leaned over to my girlfriend. At least this should be a fun little late-night adventure. Oh yeah, awesome adventure. Driving 40 minutes to clean up the mess your brother's cat made. It was only 35 minutes away, but I knew pointing that out would just start a fight. So we sat there in silence that was only occasionally broken by Google Maps telling me which random back road to turn down. Your destination is on the left, Mr. Wash 24-hour cleaners. We pulled into an empty strip mall. All the stores looked like dark empty boxes except for one that was fluorescently lit with a blinking open sign and a car out front. We parked and carried the wet bedding inside. A bell jingled when we opened the door. There was someone else inside the laundromat. He was sitting by the large front window, minding his own business with headphones in, waiting for some laundry to be done. To avoid being awkwardly close to him, we chose a washer close to the back of the building and sat up on the folding tables next to it. We sat next to the cracked door to an office which had two signs taped to it. One said, "Attendant will return at 8 a.m., and the other read, "Clothes left in the building for more than a month will be disposed of at the owner's expense." "Oh, let's not forget our blanket or they'll sue us," I tried to joke. My girlfriend feigned a half smile. The timer on the washer read 30 minutes. Not only were we tired and fighting, but we were also in the room with a complete stranger. This was going to be a conversation-less half hour. I probably would have fallen asleep if it weren't for the fact that I was getting pretty paranoid about this guy. He had a baseball hat pulled down over his face and these large framed glasses, and I felt stupid being scared of him. Besides, the sign right behind him said, 24-hour surveillance cameras in use, and you could see them mounted to the ceiling. I looked at my girlfriend and gave her a smile, but she just sighed and rolled her eyes. So I got back on my phone and scrolled around a bit, but I couldn't help looking up every couple of seconds to check on Glasses Guy. He didn't have a basket with him or anything. That's kinda weird, but then again, we didn't have one either. But then I saw what he did have. Under his seat was a big jug of bleach. Okay, he's probably just getting some stains out. Some really big stains. I glanced at my girlfriend. How could she look so mad at me while also playing Angry Birds? Yeah, I don't know why she still played Angry Birds. I tried telling her that the iPhone 4 wanted its apps back, but... Wait a second. Is he? I squinted over at Glasses Guy and traced the path of his headphones from his ears, down the front of his sweatshirt, but the cord was unplugged. I kept looking to see if he was going to grab it and plug it in. It could have just popped out, but it felt like a whole minute of him sitting there staring at the ground almost motionless. Then he gets up and walks outside. I look at the timer, 18 minutes left. I look at my girlfriend. I think we should leave. What? That guy's headphones have been unplugged this entire time. And he only has bleach, that's it, no laundry basket or anything. Maybe that's what he's getting from his car. Outside he was getting something from the trunk in the parking lot. I mean, what's he even washing? She asked. We scanned the wall of washers. Only one was running, and it had our blanket in it. My eyes searched each washer and dryer hoping to see a single piece of clothing. But they were all empty. The bell on the door jingles and Glasses steps inside carrying a black duffel bag. We look at each other, but before we can even move he stands up on the chair he was sitting on and starts lowering the blinds on the front window. I was trying to think of any way out when he spoke. Sorry, those passing headlights were killing my eyes. He reached into the duffel bag. The thought at this point in the story is always, run. Get out of there. But when you're in the moment the decision isn't that simple. Maybe the duffel bag had his clothes in it. Maybe the headlights were bothering him. Maybe he puts headphones in to avoid talking to people. It seems stupid, but you don't want to be the person who sprints out of a laundromat and leaves their soaking wet blanket because someone is acting slightly strange. So we sat there frozen as he took a knife out of his bag. He was between us and the door. His face was totally expressionless while he walked towards us. He didn't look happy, or sad, or angry, or whatever emotion killers have in movies. He looked tired. We started backing up, searching for a fire exit but trying to keep eyes on him. My girlfriend grabbed my hand. He was only 10 feet away now. We kept pacing slowly back to keep our distance. "This is how I'm going to." She yanked me into the office and slammed the door shut. She dead-bolted it just as the knob shook from the other side. Our hands darted in our pockets. We left our phones out on the table. What a stupid mistake. The knob kept jiggling, then it stopped. A monitor set up on the desk showed the security camera's perspective, right above the door. He stared at it. At us. Then he did something I'll never get out of my head. He took his fingers and just mashed his face around, like something broke inside him. There was a PC sitting on the desk. "We can contact the police through here." I turned it on and saw the welcome screen, "Please enter password." A password. A password was standing between us and safety. There was nothing we could do except wait. Wait until 8 when employees would return and the world would be awake. After an hour of staring into the camera, the guy just closed his eyes, turned, gathered his things and left. But we learned our lesson. We weren't about to take a chance on leaving that room until there were people here. So we sat. We both just started crying. Didn't know what else to do. We said "I love you" probably a million times, sitting on that cold hard floor. It was so uncomfortable. So we looked around the room for something to sit on and saw the Lost and Found. Here we go. This should be. I stopped. Inside the box was a Ren and Stimpy blanket, with a yellow stain. Story 5, Temptation. We all have to fight temptation. For my father, it was fighting the temptation to have another drink. For my mother, it was fighting the temptation to continue her affair with the neighbor. I guess that is why I have always been strict with myself when it came to my own temptations. I wouldn't have dessert after dinner. I wouldn't play video games until I had finished my homework. I wouldn't go out and get drunk with the kids from school. I wouldn't kill people. That last one may catch some people off guard. Others, well, you just might relate to my struggle. Death is beautifully gruesome. A natural death of old age. Fairly boring, yet there is still a beauty in the peaceful look on the face of the deceased. A bloody death due to an accident, or an act of violence? Now that is truly beautiful. The patterns of the blood, the pain and fear etched onto the faces of the victims. You see, death is the first thing that I truly developed an interest in. I was a straight-A student at school, but only because I was strict with fighting my temptations and making sure I did my homework and studied. I never found anything interesting. I only played video games because there was nothing else to do in the city I grew up in, and it gave my and my old man something to do on the nights when Mum would say she was going out to have a meal with her friends. We all knew she was fooling no one, but we kept up the act anyway. Those nights spent with my dad, taking it in turns to play games, talking about what games we wanted to buy next. Looking back on it, I think they were one of few things that stopped my old man from breaking for so long. On those nights, he wouldn't drink. For my sake. Even at a young age, I admired him for that. He is the main reason why I have always been strict with myself. His efforts for the sake of keeping our fake, happy little family together resonated with me. It didn't last though. Nothing ever does. One Friday night, when I was 16, I went out and stayed out pretty late. Since I was always a good kid, Mum and Dad gave me a lot of freedom from a young age. Dad was working late, which was his unspoken way of saying he was going to stay at some rundown pub until he got thrown out for being too drunk. He usually did this once a month. When I told Mum I was going out, she told me to be careful and immediately smiled as she grabbed her phone. No prizes for guessing who she was going to do with her free time. I headed out to my usual place. A quaint, little late-night bookshop/cafe that wasn't too far from home. I liked it because it was usually pretty quiet, and anyone that did go in that late was usually someone interesting to watch for a little while. On this particular night, however, after sitting and reading for a few hours without seeing anyone worth watching come into the shop, I decided to head home. It was getting close to 11 p.m., the closing time for the shop. When I reached my house, I noticed something was off immediately. It was too quiet, too still. See, Mum was usually back from her fling by now, and would be sat in the living room with a glass of wine, freshly showered, watching whatever trashy film she had decided on for the evening. That night, the house was silent. No lights, no sounds, no movement. As if no one was home. I walked inside, flicking the light switch as I did. As I took my shoes off, I noticed my dad's work boots kicked off. It was unusual for him to have been kicked out this early, but sometimes it happens if the place got too busy and they didn't want him loitering at the bar. I thought nothing of it as I headed upstairs to my room. What caught my attention the most was the door to my parents' room. It was halfway open. There were no lights on inside. No sounds, no movement. Just darkness. I'd never known them to go to bed with the door open. That's why I decided to check inside. Slowly pushing the door open, I still couldn't hear anything. Which was odd. If they were asleep, I would have expected to hear breathing. Probably snoring too, knowing the state my dad was likely to be in. I turned on the light, and I pieced together what had happened. The reason why the house was so quiet. In the room, were 3 dead bodies. My mother, laying on the bed with her throat crushed. Our neighbor, laying on the floor with a considerable amount of head trauma. And my dad, slumped in the corner, with multiple stab wounds to his torso. After almost vomiting, but managing to swallow the bile back down, I immediately phoned the police. While waiting for them to arrive, I went back to my parents' room once more. This time, however, after knowing what to expect, I was more composed. That was the day my fascination with death started. The entire scene spoke to me in a way that I imagine a Jackson Pollock painting spoke to an art enthusiast. The only way I can describe it is that, the scene in that room made sense. It didn't take long for the police to arrive. When they did, they escorted me out of the house. A young, female police officer sat with me, while 3 others went into the house to view the scene. They didn't spend long in there. They didn't need to. I was taken to the police station to answer a few questions, and I waited there while they phoned my grandparents to come and collect me. It didn't take them long to figure out what had happened. My mum, figuring she had plenty of time with the house to herself, decided to invite the neighbor round to our house for a change. Not expecting my dad to have been kicked out of the pub so early, she wasn't able to finish her business before he came home. Now, while we were all fully aware of the affair, up until then my dad had never caught her before. I guess the sight of it, coupled with being heavily drunk, caused him to snap. He used the lamp to beat the neighbor to death. While he was doing so, Mum had taken the pocket knife out of her purse to try and stop him. After stabbing him a few times, he managed to overpower her, and he strangled her to death. Crushed her throat in the process. From there, it looked like her simply crawled over to the corner, and bled to death. After that, I went and lived with my grandparents for a couple of years, until I went away to university. Now, what does that have to do with my temptation to kill people? You see, after seeing the scene in my parents' room, I could never quite get the thought of death out of my mind. Of how beautiful that scene was. I wanted so desperately to see something else like it again. I knew that the easiest way would be to kill someone. However, being so used to fighting my temptations, I was able to hold back. Sometimes it was harder than others though. Some days, I would see someone walking alone at night, and without even realizing it I would be following them. On those days, I had to come up with a coping mechanism. I would take something of theirs. A lock of hair, a piece of fabric from their outfit. Occasionally I even broke into their homes to take something really personal, like a photograph. Collecting things like these gave me a daily reminder whenever I saw them. These were all proof of my resolve. They showed just how easily I could have killed these people, but didn't. They gave me a sense of pride. Sitting there, in the glass display case on the left-hand side of my room. Yesterday was a tough day to resist the temptation. He was such an easy target. A thin, shy man, who was so involved in his own world that he had no awareness of his surroundings at all. I have seen him a few times, and every time he got more and more appealing. I knew I had to take something from him. So, I followed him home. After midnight, I broke into his house. When I entered his room, I saw him sleeping. On his left hand, I noticed something that I had never seen while observing him in the streets. A wedding ring. His hands were always in his pockets while he walked around, so I never had a chance to see it until now. I knew right then, that was what I had to take. So I did. Upon waking up this morning, I still felt a sense of pride after yesterday's endeavor. I walked over to the glass display case on the right side of my room, and admired the wedding ring. There was a bit of a stain on it, but that was unavoidable. You can't keep a ring clean when you remove the finger it is on. As I admired the various trophies in the case, the finger with the ring, a tooth, an eye, I couldn't help but feel a slight pang of guilt about giving in to my temptations. But, we all have moments of weakness, right? I mean, my dad, the man I respected so much for his resolve, used to give in to his once a month. I felt like I could allow myself to indulge in my temptations on the same schedule too. Story 6, The Promise Part 1. The anniversary of Lane's death wasn't for another 3 days, but when Cochise came on the radio as I approached that curve, I took it as a sign. Lane's favorite song. I pressed the gas and shifted gears as Chris Cornell began to wail. The needle on the odometer crept up. 45. 50. The yellow posted warning sign screamed at me, but still I accelerated. The night Lane died, the cops estimated that his friend Jimmy had tried to take this curve doing 65. Fucking Jimmy, the weird little stoner kid from down the street. I hated him, hated his faux hippie parents who changed the flowers around the roadside crosses with the seasons, like Jimmy and Lane and those other kids gave a damn if it was Christmas or Easter anymore. But the Hendricks did it anyway. Now the crosses were decorated with bright orange leaves, for fall. I saw them appear just as I entered the curve, doing 67 miles per hour. The rear of my beat-up Civic began to slip, but I gripped the wheel and held into it, taking the outside. I kept my gaze focused ahead of the slide, knowing better than to fix on stationary objects. Too late to hit the brakes. Instead, I eased off the gas and turned into the spin at the apex of the turn. My car gave a shimmy and a weird bobble. For one heart-stopping moment, I thought this would be the one that got me. But the Civic held on, even on tires that desperately needed replacing. When I accelerated at the end of the turn and whipped onto the straightaway again, I released the breath I was holding and pulled to the side of the road. I walked back to the place where the 4 white crosses waited and stared at the name on the first one. Then I ripped the leaves from it. Jimi Hendrix. They hadn't even spelled his name right. They hadn't taught him how to spell his name and they hadn't taught him how to take a curve. I walked behind the crosses and lay on the ground beside a scarred oak tree, in the same spot that had once soaked up my brother's blood. I stared up at the September sky and said, "You left me all alone." The night of the accident, my mother had called to say she'd be working late. Although I was only 14 months older than Lane, my mother had always left me in charge. As soon as I'd told Lane, he'd started pestering me to go to the movies with Jimmy. I usually let him do what he wanted because Lane could talk the birds from the skies. But my mother's new boyfriend made me uncomfortable. He stood too close, stared too long. I'd cast a nervous glance at the living room. "Hey," Lane said. "Go to Sherry's till 9. I swear I'll be home by then. I won't leave you alone with him." I had nodded, and he'd grinned. I hadn't smiled back. He'd made me look at him. "I promised Dad and I promise you I'll always protect you. I swear on my soul, I'll never leave you and I'll always have your back." So, 9 o'clock, okay? But that was a promise he hadn't been able to keep. When I'd rounded that curve 9:15 that night, the EMTs were frantically working to save Lane and one of the other boys. I'd thought maybe they'd known Lane wouldn't make it to the hospital, because they'd let me have a few precious seconds by his side. His green eyes had been dazed, unfocused. I'd clutched his bloody hand and screamed his name. He'd made a gurgling sound and turned his face toward me. Hold on, I begged. "Don't you leave me. You promised you'd never leave me." He'd squeezed my hand and then they'd pulled me away. He died before they reached the hospital. If Lane had been driving, would he have made the curve? I thought the handling on the Hendrix Accord and my Civic probably wouldn't have been that much different, and Lane had even more experience than I had on the dirt bike track. Unlike me, he hadn't quit when our father died. But that was just one more what if in a towering pile of what ifs that loomed high in the sky and meant nothing at all. I pulled into my childhood driveway a few minutes later and sighed. Visits with my mother, never pleasant, grew excruciating around the anniversary of Lane's death. It hurt to see what this place had become, what my mother had become. Flower beds so meticulously tended when my father was alive were strangled out by weeds, framing a sagging, peeling white house with missing shingles. A rusted swing set still lingered beside the house, unused for over a decade. And the outside of this place wasn't half as desperate as the inside. I put the car in park, stepped out and adjusted the short skirt that was part of my work uniform before kicking a beer can and scowling at the tall grass. I barged in without knocking and followed the sound of the blaring television to the living room, where my mother's boyfriend predictably occupied my father's old recliner. I kicked a pizza box and flinched when a cockroach skittered away from my gleaming black heels. "Where's Mom?" I asked, and Arias turned his bloodshot eyes on me. He leered, his eyes traveling slowly up my body then down again. "Is that any way to greet me? Oh, my bad. Hey, Darius, you fucking pervert. Where is my mother?" He laughed and stood, lurching on his feet. For a moment, I felt the same panic I had at 15, but my fingers fumbled in my pockets and closed around the knife I kept there. I forced myself to remain calm. "I wasn't a helpless teenager anymore. She's at the cemetery," Darius said, then licked his lips. "We've got time to have a nice little visit. Come say hi to Daddy." "Stay away from me," I said. "You got all this time, why don't you go mow the fucking yard? Seems like the least you could do, since my mother pays all your bills." His eyes hardened. "Don't talk like that to me, you little whore." Moving faster than I anticipated he could, he lunged at me. My head cracked against the drywall and he seized my chin, forcing me to look up at him. His breath smelled like beer and garlic and I gagged. "I hear you put out for everybody that comes through that bar where you work. I'm getting jealous." He pressed his filthy, stinking body against mine and tried to push up my skirt, but the knife was already in my hand. His eyes widened when he heard the click of the switchblade. I was sure Darius had been in enough barroom brawls to know what that sound meant. I pressed it against his crotch. "That's not big enough to kill me," he hissed. "And if you ever cut me, you'd better fucking kill me." I smiled. "It's big enough to get rid of some unsightly bulges. I keep her sharp." He released my chin and held up his hands. I let him back away. "Tell your mother if she ain't back by dark, I'm locking her out." "This isn't your house," I snapped. He shot me a baleful look, then slumped back to the recliner. I gulped a breath of fresh air when I stepped outside. I'd left this place as soon as I'd graduated high school, and if not for the obligation I felt for my mother, I would never come back at all. The cemetery was visible from the driveway, just over the hillside, but I chose to drive. I could guess what shape my mother was in. I found Mama sprawled on the ground between my father's and Lane's graves, a half-empty bottle of Jack in her hands. Once Bella had been beautiful, as her name suggested, but those days were long gone. Her face was ravaged by alcohol, drugs and grief. She looked up with bleary red eyes. "It's time to go, Mama," I said, and reached for her arm. She jerked away. "I'm not ready to go yet. It's getting dark and I need to get to work." "Go then," she muttered. "I need to make sure you're home, and that you have your medicine. You want it, right?" Of course she did. Mama liked her medicine almost as much as her alcohol. After a near overdose last month, I had taken her pills and dispensed them to her on a weekly basis. It really needed to be on a daily basis, but I couldn't stand the thought of making this trip every day. I suspected Mama went through a week's supply in a couple of days, but was also pretty sure it would take more than that to kill her. Mama allowed me to help her up. She kissed her fingertips and placed them first on my father's tombstone, then on Lane's. "It was your fault," she told me. I wrapped my arm around my mother's waist, taking on most of the small woman's weight. I'd heard comments like that so many times they barely stung anymore. I figured Lane was better off wherever he was, because surely this was hell. I was almost jealous of him. I didn't put much stock in the afterlife, and the thought of just nothingness sounded pretty damn good to me. We didn't talk on the way back to my mother's house. No use telling her about Darius. Mama hadn't cared when I told her about him 7 years ago, and she wouldn't care now. Another wound that barely stung anymore. I helped her to the front door, gave her the little box labeled with the days of the week, and left. All this crap had taken longer than anticipated, and I was nearly 10 minutes late when I pulled up to Charlie's bar. Half the sign had shorted out, so it simply read Char Bar, which was an apt name for anything that came out of that kitchen. That's what the locals called it. Charlie hated it, so I called it that, too. I straightened my skirt, flipped and tousled my hair, then undid an extra couple of buttons on my shirt. I was a damn good waitress, but I wasn't naive enough to think that's why I got the best tips. When you leave home at 17, you learn to play the game to survive. Brody looked up from the bar when I walked in and gave me one of his perfect, dazzling smiles. He was a college kid making a little extra cash while he finished up the school year. Maybe not as spoiled as most of the ones who came through. He actually worked, but a rich boy just the same. He'd be gone before the ink dried on his diploma. The bar was a weird mix of college kids, locals and stragglers off Interstate 24. They segregated themselves in odd little clumps. I edged past a rowdy group of bikers and headed toward the bar. Brody placed a bag of lemons on the bar and said loudly, "Thanks for picking these up. Sorry I made you late." "No problem," I said, taking his cue. Charlie came around the corner. He looked at me, the bag of lemons, and finally Brody. "Tell Jacobs if he can't get the order right, I'll take my business elsewhere." Brody tapped a salute off his forehead and Charlie frowned, but he disappeared back to the kitchen without another word. "Thanks," I said, and he smiled again. He really was handsome. I liked the way his blue eyes crinkled in the corners when he grinned. But we were so different I wasn't even sure if we'd count as the same species. "You've got even tables." I already did their drinks. 2 and 8 have ordered. 6 was still looking at the menu. He was always helping me. Every shift, he stayed late to help me roll silverware and refill ketchup bottles, though that was not part of his duties. I'd never admit it, but sometimes the most fun I had all day was when we were cleaning up. He'd put some stupid song on the jukebox and sing to me. Sometimes we'd dance. Even though he probably just wanted what every other guy who tried to talk to me wanted, at least he was nice about it. Unlike the biker at table 3, who was yelling to get my attention, "Hey, Blondie," he shouted. "Get that sweet ass over here and take my order. I'm thirsty." Christy, the other waitress on shift that night, stood helplessly by, trying to take his order, but the biker would have none of it. I motioned her forward. "Take my 6, I said. "I'll handle it." Looking relieved, Christy scurried away. I pasted on a smile and sauntered over to the table. I spoke to the one making all the noise, a muscular dark-haired man with a snake tattoo that started at his neck and ended with rattles down his middle finger. "What can I get you?" He leaned back in his chair and gave me an appreciative smile. Fishing his wallet from his pocket by the chain attached to his belt loop, he withdrew 2 $100 bills and placed them beneath the salt shaker. 2 buckets of bud to start. "One of these is for that ab, one is for you if you don't let us run dry till that 100 is gone. Understand, sweet thing?" "Sure thing, honey," I drawled, and his grin widened. As I walked away, I heard him tell his buddies, "Tell me that ain't the best ass in Tennessee." I rolled my eyes and made a face at Brody, who stood tense at the bar, watching the exchange. 2 buckets of Budweiser, I said. "Avery, that's not your table. You don't have to serve those guys. I can take care of myself, Brody." He frowned, but turned to fix the buckets without another word. Sweet of him to worry, but unnecessary. Plus, that tip would be great, considering rent was due this week. I might actually be able to eat something that didn't come from the Char Bar. When I returned to the table, I noticed a cell number scrawled on one of the bills. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes again and instead, engaged in some banter with them. When I walked away, Rattlesnake slapped my ass. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Brody start to come around the bar and I hurried to head him off. I said, "I can take care of myself," I hissed. "Do not go over there." His blue eyes flashed. "Avery, you're not a piece of meat. He has no right to touch you." "I don't mind." He scowled and threw a dish towel behind the bar. "Maybe you should." "Yeah, maybe I should. Maybe I should do a lot of things. But these days, it was hard to feel much of anything." Finally, the bikers left and the crowd thinned. After I took table 4 their check, I stepped outside to smoke. When I heard the back door creak open a moment later, I flicked my ashes and said, "If I just fuck you, will you stop following me around like some little damn dog?" Brody sighed, leaned back against the wall, and squinted at me. I clutched the shoulders of the man who labored over me. His snake tattoo looked even more sinister, covered in a fine sheen of sweat. But I wasn't thinking about that, wasn't even thinking about him. Sex was just a release for me. There were never any feelings attached. Maybe that was why Brody's words troubled me so much. I closed my eyes, remembering what he'd said. "Geez, Avery. Why are you such a hard ass?" "Maybe I just care about you." I snorted. "You don't know anything about me." "I want to," he said. "One chance. Let me take you out on a date." "A date?" I nearly snorted again. I hadn't been on a real date since high school. One-night stands with strangers hardly counted. "Brody had no idea. Why would you want to date me?" I demanded. He gave me that crooked grin and shrugged. "I dunno, because sometimes you forget to be an asshole." I laughed in spite of myself. "I think you're afraid of me," he said. "I think you know I'd be good to you, and you don't know how to handle that." "I'm not relationship material," I said, and took another drag of my cigarette. "You could be. With me." I stubbed my cigarette out and gave him a patient smile. "You think we're alike. We're not." I pointed through the window at a group of roughnecks. "I'm like them. White trash, going nowhere." Then I pointed at a group of giggling college girls waiting around the bar for Brody's return. "You're one of them. You'll leave here after you graduate, marry a girl like that, named Mallory or Ashley or Tiffany, and forget about this little dive bar you worked in during college. You'll forget about me. I don't mean anything to anyone." "You're wrong," he said. "You mean something to me." The biker collapsed on top of me and I sighed, glad he was finally finished. I'd hoped he could take my mind off things, but now I regretted even coming to his motel room. He rolled onto his back, and I lay there, thinking. Waiting until I thought he dozed off. Then I eased away from him and fumbled for my clothes in the dark. His hand shot out and grabbed me, pulling me back. "Where you think you're going?" he asked, slurring. "I need to get home," I said, and tried to pull away. "No," he said. "We ain't finished yet, darlin'. Just taking a breather." "I'm finished," I said. "Let me up." In the dark, I didn't see the fist swinging around at me. He clocked me in the side of the face and I fell back, stunned. His hands closed around my throat and I kicked and flailed at him, but he was so strong. My last thought before I lost consciousness wasn't of Lane, but of Brody. Of how disappointed he'd be when they found my naked, battered body in some cheap motel tomorrow. I tried to tell him I was no good. Guess he'd finally see that. I woke up on my stomach, my cheek pressed against stiff white sheets. It took me a moment to remember where I was, but I was smart enough not to move until I got my bearings. I hurt. I hurt all over, especially my throat. What had he done to me? I needed to cough. My throat burned, tickled. My eyes watered and I didn't know how long I'd be able to suppress it. I heard his labored breathing beside me. Sounded like he was out, but I didn't dare turn my head. Instead, I strained to see in the dim room, looking for a weapon. He'd left the bathroom light on. I saw the contents of my purse strewn across the worn carpet. My wallet gaped open. Empty. Motherfucker. I gritted my teeth and made a push toward the edge of the bed. I paused, but detected no change in his breathing. I forced myself up on shaky legs and fumbled on my clothes. Stuffing my things back into my purse, I realized my money wasn't the only thing missing. So was my knife. The smart thing would have been to slip out the door and run. But I needed my money. Not just the $100 tip, but the other $170 he'd taken from my wallet. I crept to his side of the bed and unplugged the lamp. When I tried to lift it, I found it was bolted to the table, so I unplugged the phone instead. Then I searched until I found his wallet. I thought about just taking my part of the money, but I thought, fuck it, and took it all, my money, plus 200 or so. He began to stir. I gripped the phone and crashed it down on his head. He cursed, and I hit him again. Then I ran. The morning sunlight nearly blinded me, and for one terrifying moment, I couldn't find my keys. Please, 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 I gasped, fumbling in my purse. There they were. I jumped in my car, still watching the motel door, but it never opened. I didn't kill him, I thought. Surely I didn't kill him. I was nearly a mile away when I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. Blood spattered my face. I hadn't even felt it. Oh, God. I said, and fumbled in my glove compartment for napkins. 20 minutes later, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, trying to figure out what to do. Ugly red bruises stood out against the pale skin of my throat. Even the whites of my eyes were red. Maybe I should go to the police. It was self-defense, right? I decided to drive back to the motel. To my relief, his bike was gone when I got there. For 2 days, I never left my apartment. The next night, however, I had to work. I almost called in. This was the anniversary of Lane's death. I might not make it until tomorrow anyway. But with my luck, I'd probably survive. Again. I tried to cover up the bruises with makeup, but that somehow made them look worse. I washed it off, then tied a scarf around my neck. It looked dumb, but I couldn't think of anything else. At least my red eyes had cleared up. Brody gave me a long look when I walked into the bar. Change of shift was busy and I managed to avoid him until my first smoke break. He followed me outside. "That biker guy's been looking for you," he said. "Oh?" I said, and he frowned at the rasp in my voice. "I told him you'd quit. When he came back the next night, I told him you'd still quit." Charlie backed me up. He looked pretty rough. Not as rough as you, though. Before I knew it, he pushed me against the wall and reached for the scarf. "What are you doing?" I asked, trying to force his hands away. "I haven't seen anyone wear an ascot since Fred on Scooby-Doo." The scarf came free in his hands. "Jesus, Avery," he said, and I felt absurdly near tears at the horror in his eyes. When I didn't speak, he said, "That guy said you took his money. What are you into, Avery? Is it drugs?" He looked away. "Prostitution?" A tear slid down my cheek. "Is that what you think of me?" I shook my head and pushed past him. He tried to grab my arm, but I jerked away. I walked through that back door, through that restaurant, and out the front. I heard Brody call my name, but I never slowed down. Maybe fate would be kind tonight. To be continued. Story 7, My family is falling apart. Jenna. She pauses, her back turned to me. Her shoulders are drooped more than usual, her frame wispy. She's so light this time it looks as if a large gust of wind would knock her down. She sighs and then turns around, leaning on the brick outside of the door. Her breathing is labored, like she had just run from the house. She had only dropped off our little girl in her bed, and used the restroom. She was winded walking from the bathroom to the front door. "Now I'm really worried. Are you taking your medication?" Her features stay in that mask she wears when she can't talk about her feelings, smooth, and lifeless. "Yes," she answers, her tone taking on the same emotionless effect. A few seconds of silence pass before she makes eye contact with me. Her eyebrows raise as if to say, "Anything else?" Jenna is every bit as stunning as the day we had promised each other forever. Her smooth, creamy skin hasn't changed and I've never seen her have a bad hair day. Her blonde hair has a slight wave to it, and if you catch it in the sun it has bits of red. Strawberry blonde, I think I overheard one of her friends call it once. She's always had one of those small frames, even after Karis was born. She just bounced back into her pre-maternity clothes no problem. Secretly, I think many ladies envy her for it. Even now, with her face lacking emotion, her beauty can't be hidden. It's always been a mystery to me, how she's stayed looking youthful all these years. She's pushing 40 and hasn't aged a day since we met. I don't mean that in an emotional sort of way that a husband sees a wife as beautiful at every age. I mean I've tried to find any sign of it and damned if I haven't found any. I know that's a thing men aren't supposed to notice, or I guess be happy over, but it's just always struck me as odd. You know? Well, I say wife. I'm still not used to this next part. She's going to leave, head back home to her place near downtown. She got a job working at Baylor. Which was both good and bad. It meant longer hours and being on call at any time of the day. Why she chose to be a trauma surgeon, I'll never know. The horrors she sees, I can only imagine. The divorce finalized earlier this year. 10 years gone, I can't believe it. It's my worst nightmare. Karis mostly stays with me. We decided given her mother's hectic schedule, it would be best that she have a stable environment for home and school. It wasn't traditional, but it worked. I can't remember wanting to be anything other than a husband and a father. It is my life goal. I don't really buy into that ball and chain nonsense, never have. I've loved every step of the way. Well, except this part. Her face draws up into a tired smile. One of those forced ones she gives all of her patients when she has just pulled an 18-hour shift. It isn't that she doesn't mean them, it's that her body starts to shut down most of the unnecessary functions. Such as excessive emotions. I've seen this woman shut down in mid-cry with razor-sharp focus and attentiveness that would rival any politician. It's an amazing trait to have. I do envy her that. Without realizing what I am doing, I place my hand on her shoulder. Hey, you alright? I feel her tense slightly, but she doesn't move from my grip. I'm tempted to hold her, but I do the gentlemanly thing and back away, clearing my throat. Jenna had made it very clear that things were done, no sense in putting myself through all of this a second time. She relaxes and slowly bobs her head up and down. Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired, she pauses and then adds, you know, with the new place and all. Moving and work has been draining. I don't buy it. Not completely, but I know exhaustion when I see it. Listen, Jen, don't drive. If you need me to get you an Uber, or drive you, let me. I don't think you should be driving in that state. She bristles, her chin raising a degree. A bit of her stubbornness flares, and I'm reminded of the side of her that really turns me on. I know it's not an appropriate thought, and I quickly flip the switch in my brain. Whoa, boy, shut it down. This venue is closed up for good, windows boarded. She must sense my hesitation, or something in the way I look. Who would watch Karis? Her words are soft, inviting. It reminds me of simpler times. She's looking up at me with those big doe eyes. I know she isn't doing it on purpose. I know when she's trying to seduce. This is different. Then, as quickly as it comes, she turns away and walks over to her small Honda Civic. I'll never understand why she doesn't buy something better. She's owned that car forever. She easily makes enough to drive anything she wants. Yet, she sticks with this tiny, white car. My guess is she's saving for an early retirement. Can't say I blame her. My parents taught me well. I'd only need to put in another 7 to 10 years at most and I'd have enough to retire on. Even if I live to be 150. After that, well, I guess I'm fucked. But I'll be old as hell and probably shitting myself, so who cares? She leans on the door for a moment, her hair picked up by the breeze. Tom, I just want you to know, she trails off. Her brows press together and she bites her lip. I want to be impatient with her, yell and scream and demand to know what's going on. Problem is, I can't anymore. I'm no longer entitled to an answer and it kills me inside. I've gone from anger to sorrow in seconds, depressing myself. What I want to say is, spit it out, God damn it. Instead I smile and say, "What is it, hun?" Her eyes dart from the house to my face, no doubt looking back at Karis's window. "I'm sorry," she whispers. Then she's gone, driving down the road and turning onto the main street. I stand there for a long time. Long after the dust has settled and my neighbors have turned out their lights. All I wanted was to be a husband, a father. Why's that so hard? When do I get to see mommy's new place? Karis asks. Her legs are dangling from the stool as she stuffs the waxy chocolate donuts into her mouth. I don't know why those things taste so good to kids. It's basically solidified fat and sugar. The film on your teeth is the worst. I don't let her have them too often, but today was the first day back to school and I wanted her to have something comforting. Karis, much like myself at her age, is showing all the signs I did. She has bad anxiety. Yay, genetics. I can tell she's already dreading school, her face falling as I usher her along to finish her breakfast. I can't believe she starts third grade this year. Seems like yesterday I was chasing a bouncing, squealing kiddo running in her diapers. I frown as I check my watch. Jenna was supposed to be here 20 minutes ago. Normally, Jen would have Karis giggling and forgetting about her first day jitters, excitedly telling her how much fun she's going to have for the year. She was famously a few minutes late, but never this much. If she didn't get here soon, I'd have to leave without her. This wasn't like her at all. She always made time for Karis, especially on the first day of school. It was a tradition for all of us to walk with Karis hand in hand to class and wish her a good day. 10 more minutes go by and I can't wait much longer. I text her one last time, hoping that maybe she had slept in, or that she would respond with an immediate apology, explaining herself. Then a full 5 minutes go by, and then 7. This time, I really can't wait anymore. For the first time ever, Jenna will miss Kara's first day at school. I look over to Karis as she downs the last of her milk and smile. "You ready, honey bunny?" She grins ear to ear at the nickname and nods her head. I blow Karis a kiss from the hallway as she sits at her desk. She's already chatting with a girl across from her and laughing. I recognize the girl from Karis's first grade class a few years back. Glad to see that Karis has already found a friend. Maybe it's true what they say, kids are simple and they don't think about things as much as we do. She seems to be adjusting just fine in her new desk, all smiles and semi-toothless grins. I stare at her from the hall. She really is a spitting image of her mother. Except her eyes. Her eyes are green like mine and she's tall and lanky. Me and Jenna would always joke about how Karis would be as tall as her in a few years. It wasn't an exaggeration. Karis is easily going to reach 6 feet tall in her teens and she would be strong. Real strong. Every sport we'd put her in, she is number 1 on the team. I don't mean to brag, but in this case she actually is a hard-working kiddo. Now if she would apply herself more to reading, we would be all set. I've never seen a kid that could melt to the floor the way she can when she has to sit at a table and focus on letters. $1,500 and a reading tutor took care of it this past summer, but damn if the girl wasn't stubborn about it. Took that from her daddy too. I'd almost forgotten about Jenna's odd behavior as I walk out to my car. Then the rage hits me. How the hell does she promise to be here and never show? How could she do that to Karis? No call, not even a text. At this point, I'm not sure if I should be angry or worried. But in the end, the anger fizzles and worry creeps in. My mind switches back to her face last night and her words. "I'm sorry." What was she apologizing about? Was it because she knew she wouldn't be able to make it this morning? If so, why didn't she just tell me? I pull my phone from my pocket. It vibrates and I get excited. Maybe this was her. I frown at the text message alerting me that my phone bill has gone through and nothing else. What the fuck is going on? I can't worry about it too much, so I head into work. I'm hopeful that in the next few hours she'll call, or text before I really start to freak out. It's not too bad of a day and nearly 2:30 when I get the call. "Mr. Holloway?" The woman croaks. It's one of those smokers' voices, the stereotypical kind that you hear in cartoons. "Yes, speaking." I respond, "This is Leslie Smith from Hawthorne Elementary. I'm the school nurse calling about Karis. The blood drains from my face. Is she okay?" I ask. I stride across my office and then shut the door. Best that no one hears something else to give the office gossip. She sighs on the other end, and then is silent for a moment. It's as if she's carefully weighing her words. Karis is fine, no cuts or bruises. More reluctance, and then, "It's more what happened that really concerns me," she says. "Mom?" I'm confused for a moment as to why I'm getting a phone call if Karis isn't hurt. Then my chest tightens. Did she harm someone else? I silently hope this isn't true. It's the last thing I needed after this day. Heavens no, that girl is as kind as they come. Never seen her get upset even when she ought to. The nurse chuckles despite her earlier reservations. Mrs. Smith, she interrupts. I'm sorry, Mrs. Smith, if my daughter isn't harmed and she hasn't harmed anyone, then what is the nature of this call? I'm beginning to lose my patience. She's silent on the other end again, but I can hear her shifting the phone. Look, maybe it isn't my place, Lord knows I've had my fair share of problems, but, Karis said some very strange things today. Is everything okay at home? I tense up. So, she had been paying attention to what happened this morning. Well, normally her mother and I walk her in on her first day and her mom never showed. I finish. I feel the heat rising in my cheeks as I finish the sentence. It's awkward having to say it out loud. Well, now, that's exactly what I mean. She sounds genuinely confused. I'm not following, I say, trying to get her to the point. Mr. Holloway, she clears her throat and shifts on the other line. There's that odd crackling that comes with a landline. They must still be using one of the ancient ones with a cord that connects to the base. Karis was sent to me today because she asked the teacher if Mama and her could go to the restroom together. I'm still confused and even more so now. You mean Jenna came up there? What's wrong with that? Relief floods my system. So she had finally got up there and had sat in with Karis. The relief is quickly replaced with anger. Why hadn't she made an attempt to text me or call me back? I had been worried sick. The silence on the other end makes me rethink my assumption. Something is wrong. I don't know how I know it. Something in the shifting, in Mrs. Smith's sighs and heavy breath on the other end. My mind swims with the possibilities, but in the end I just ask, what is it? The nurse finally speaks at my question. Mrs. Holloway never came in to see Karis today. As a matter of fact, Karis has been very cross with the staff and all of the other children are, frankly, afraid to go near her. During recess she sat on a bench and talked to an invisible person next to her. The teacher, bless her soul, tried to give the girl the benefit of the doubt, first day jitters, you know, that sort of thing. But as the day has gone on, she still insists on it. I sit quietly, soaking in what she has just told me. I know Karis might have been upset, but I didn't realize she was this upset. I am going to have a chat with her, see what's really going on. Finally, I say, Mrs. Smith. I know if this divorce is hard on me, it's got to be harder on an 8-year-old. I slowly start warming to the thought. This isn't some abnormal thing, it's probably fairly common with children of divorcees. I hate thinking of that word, I hate that it applies to me, and I hate even more that it includes her. Another broken family, nothing new. Welcome to America. Suddenly my lunch turns sour in my stomach and I'm unsure if it will stay put. I put on my best reassuring voice, the kind I use with my own mother. Let me have a chat with her tonight and see what's really going on. I hear Mrs. Smith shift again and then a sigh. See that you do, Mr. Holloway. Dr. Norris thinks that transferring her to a different class would be helpful as well. Children can be quite judgmental, as I'm sure you know. It may be good for a fresh start. I bristle, but the anger gives way to weariness. She's right, as much as I hate to admit it. It would probably help ease her into the school year. I nod before answering. I think that would be for the best. You have my permission. She's smiling as she says the next part. I can hear it in her voice. It's forced, but I know it's out of sheer politeness. She wants me to feel at ease. I think that's wise of you, Mr. Holloway. We'll need you to fill out a transfer file, but we can send it via email. Just be sure to sign it before tomorrow. Thank you, I say, quick to be done with this conversation. Of course, she says, then adds, and it's a real shame to hear about all of your struggles. I hope it gets better for the two of you. I awkwardly mumble a thank you and then hang up. Karis is all smiles as she rushes up to the car. The crossing guard calls out for her to slow down, but she's already at the passenger door. I wave in mouth sorry to the portly, scowling woman. She nods curtly, red-faced, and then turns back to her duties, guiding the others across. Daddy. She gushes as she hops in the front seat. Her bag gets tossed and she reaches for her seatbelt. Let's go home, I want to play VR. I laugh at her eagerness. I'm ready to celebrate too, another end to a long work day. Less than 10 minutes later, we're home, dropping our things by the front door. That's future us's problem. I adjust the visor and goggles to her small head and then step back, knowing that she's about to tear up the room on Beat Saber. I shake my head as she starts her latest pop obsession, really getting into the dance. Girl's got some moves, just like her mama. Then I think about that and frown. I silently send out a warning to any and all potential suitors with a death threat so vile Fidel Castro would cringe at its savagery. I used to feel that way about anyone that looked at Jenna when she rocked Dance Revolution at the mall arcade. After dinner, I tell Karis to go brush her teeth and change into her jammies. I've avoided it all day, but it's time for the chat. I know it's probably normal, so I make a mental note to not be overly serious, but enough that I get my point across. No one ever tells you about this part of divorce, the ugly parts where you have to accept and understand how your child processes the inevitable change. I'm ready for my story, Daddy. She calls from her room down the hall. Karis, stop it. I snap. Her green eyes are brimming with tears as she shakes her head at me. No. Mommy was there, in class with me. No one else saw her, but she was there. I let out a long sigh and squeeze the bridge of my nose, closing my eyes. I thought for sure this would play out way easier in real life. How naive of me. I really want to be an adult about it, but in the end my tiredness wins. I try a different approach, a more human one. Honey, I know today was tough and we're going to have a lot of those, but I need you to be honest with me right now. Was Mommy really there today, or did you just pretend like she was there? Her chin raises and she squares up to me. I am not a liar, pants on fire, Daddy. She crosses her arms in a huff and turns toward the wall, her little jaw trembling but held firm. I have to stifle a laugh by moving my hand over my mouth. The only time she ever gets this worked up is when she believes in what she is saying. This is her truth, and while I don't believe that her mom was actually there, I know that Karis believes it. After a few moments, I speak carefully. Sometimes, when we get upset, we see things that aren't really there. Her shoulders stiffen and she still won't look at me, but I sense a hesitance. Daddy, Mama was there. Her words are so soft, they almost come out a whisper. Why won't you believe me? I saw her. Little droplets spill down her face as she presses her eyes together. I wince as she starts ugly crying, the kind that sends her whole body into shakes, and snot dripping down her mouth and chin. SHH, SHH I say, running my fingers across her back. I stand briefly, grab the box of tissues from her desk and then offer them to her. She grabs a handful and blows noisily into them. I swear she says between sniffles, I'm not making it up. I don't know why, but no one could see her but me. The last sentence seems to calm her and she relaxes, finally able to get it all out. Poor girl. I continue to massage her back as she lays down under the covers. I draw them up to her chin and then tuck in the sides, cocooning her the way she likes it. I massage her back until her breathing comes out heavy. I stroke her hair, then bend down and kiss her forehead. I love you, Bunny. I whisper. She still smells like she did as a baby, that faint hint of baby powder and lotions and some unknown floral scent that has stuck with her for years. It's that scent of youth, indescribable yet everyone knows what you mean. I'm in bed when I hear the sound. The TV is up loud, So I tap the mute button and listen. The only sound is the wind outside rustling the grass next to my window. There's a few creaks and pops, the house bending in the unforgiving September winds. I exhale and press the button. I jump as the movie blares into my room and I quickly turn it down. Apparently, I've been listening to it much louder than I thought. The main character is jumping into oncoming traffic, guns and car horns blaring. Finally some action. I'm tensing and balling my hands into fists as the bad guys squeal next to Detective Peterson. "You got this," I scream mentally. He makes a quick decision and then he's down a dark alleyway. The bad guys zoom past, losing him. Yes, I think, pounding my hands on the comforter. The detective gets out of his car and makes a call to the local PD. He's one of those traditional grizzle types weathered from a career of seeing too much of humanity's bad side. He lights up, and exhales a large puff of smoke when I hear something again. It's almost perfectly timed to the scraping noise the detective hears in the dark alley. This is no movie sound, it's here in my home. It sounds closer this time and I can make out new details. Before it sounded like tapping, or a crinkling bag. Sometimes Karis sneaks out of bed for a cookie or some chips. My room is located right across from the kitchen and living room. So I've almost always caught her. The back door is attached to the breakfast area. It's a design for parents to be able and keep an eye on their children in the backyard while they cook. We haven't gotten a puppy yet, but there is a dog door installed. Recently Karis has been asking for a dog and admittedly, I would welcome anything to keep me company. Especially tonight. I frown as I hear it again. It's a wet noise, like dripping onto my tile floors. Annoyed, I pause the movie. The sound stops. I'm probably just tired, I reason. It's the wind or maybe it's starting to rain outside. A couple of beats pass and I'm starting to doubt myself again when there is suddenly a few more droplets, and then it's pouring rain. It's nearly 3 in the morning when my phone goes off. I jump at the invasive jingle. Light spills into the room, bathing everything in a dull, green hue. I know it's a text. I've disabled all of my email alerts and all the other crap alerts that come with apps these days. It was a text, or a voicemail. And since the ringtone never went off, I know it has to be the former. There's only one person that would be texting me this late. A lump forms in my throat as I reach for the phone. It jingles a few more times and vibrates in my hand. What on earth? I wonder. I stare at the name on my phone, shaking as I swipe at the lock screen. It's her. I stare up at the repeated message as it continues to fill the message screen, over and over. I'm sorry. 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 I''am daddy? I let out a howl and the phone drops from my hands and onto the floor. It makes a loud clack and then slides to the wall under my window. Karis jumps and screams, scared and confused at my outburst. She pauses as I quiet and then bawls. I sigh in relief. Karis, honey, I'm sorry, you scared daddy. She continues to cry but walks toward my bed. I'm scared, she moans, there was a monster in my room. I pat the bed and wave her over. Now, baby, there's no such thing as monsters. She cries harder and wails, there is so, and it was in my room. She's almost as hysterical as she was when I yelled. I look at the bright red lights on my alarm clock, 2:45 a.m. Best to just let her sleep in here or neither of us will get a wink. All right, I say gruffly, come on up then. She pulls herself onto the bed and dives beneath the covers. Karis's tears dry up instantly in that annoying ability that all kids tend to have when they get their way. I shake my head as I get out of bed and scoop my phone up from the floor. The jingling has stopped, but the message has not changed, just a few more of the same thing, I'm sorry. I'm not sure how to respond. Is she sending this out of guilt? It was the same thing she had said last night before she left. Is she apologizing for missing Karis's first day? That has to be it. Jenna probably just got off her shift and sent a message in a dead zone. Sometimes it takes a while for a message to send, so it stores it until you hit an area with signal. It probably just sent a bunch after an attempt to send it the first time it didn't go through. My gut reaction is to attack her, ask her what she was thinking, not even bothering to send me a text, or at least call. Even if she had to work overtime, she could have let me know something. I take a few breaths, steadying myself. No, maybe something happened. Jen isn't the sort to make up excuses, that is one thing I know for sure. Finally, I send, "Is everything okay?" I expect the response to come later, but one comes immediately, "Come find me." I stare at the message for a while. Is she standing outside of the house? I sneak out of bed and look down at Karis. She's fast asleep, her head tilted back and mouth hanging open. I'm not sure what is going on, but I know it has to be serious since Jen is at my house at 3 in the morning. Not that her being awake at that hour is odd, just that she is here. She normally waits until at least 6 to call or message. I slip out of my room and turn toward the front door. I grip my sides as I walk across the cool tiles. The rain really dropped the temperature outside. My teeth are chattering as I pull on the front door. My feet hit the cold porch and I'm tempted to go back inside. It's absolutely freezing. When did it get this cold? I walk down the covered path and turn to the driveway. Her car isn't here. I look up and down the street to see if maybe she parked further down. The only thing visible on the street is the street light 3 houses down. The wind picks up and I shiver, running my hands up and down my arms. My body is shaking uncontrollably. I'm not sure if it's from the cold, or the sudden urge to run back inside and lock the door. My phone goes off again in my pocket, it sounds smaller and thin in the approaching storm. Confused, I pull it from my pocket. "Come find me. Come 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 find me. Come." A scream fills the house. The blood drains from my face as I spin on my heels and charge through the front door. It's Karis, I know that scream anywhere. It's the same one she does when she falls or hurts herself. I'm nearly to my room when the shadows bend toward the back window in the living room. They jerk, twist upward and tower over me. I stare at the dark swirl in awe. Not shadows, I realize. It's more of an ooze. A moment of insanity takes hold of me and I reach out, extending my fingers. I should run, I should scream, but what good would that do? If I am going to die to it, I want to know if it's tangible. Perhaps this is a dream, I convince myself, some vision my brain has concocted from the film earlier. I frown. No, that can't be right because there was nothing like it. Only people. This isn't a person. I take one step. Then, another. It's staring at me. I say stare not because it has eyes, but because I can feel it. I know it's looking at me. It's crazy, I realize, but it's the only way I can describe what I'm sensing. I'm 5 feet from it, maybe less, and it's taller than I realized. It's nearly to my ceiling. I stop as a streak of white light screams across it and branches in several directions. It almost reminds me of lightning, I murmur out loud. It lurches away from me, diving toward the back door. My voice must have startled it. I hear the dog door crash open and the thing pushes its way through. It makes the same sound that a bathtub does when the last of the water drains out. Almost a suction noise. I want to move, but I can't. I'm shaking all over. I want to say that I am completely in control and I have convinced myself that I'm simply tired. That the noises are the rain outside and what I just saw is the result of stress and sleep deprivation. Deep down, I know this is a lie. A smaller scream comes from my room, more of a scared whimper. Karis. My feet finally cooperate and I'm in my room. Karis is pressed against the headboard, the covers drawn all the way up to her chin. Her eyes are bulging, stuck wide open. I flick on the light and scan the room. Whatever that thing was has left, but it's not going to stop me from searching the entire room. Now gaining some courage, I drop to my belly and scan under the bed. If there was something here before, it is gone now. I know it to be true. Whatever it was left earlier through the back door. I stand and look down at Karis, my voice comes out heavy, tired. Was that the one? She blinks at me a few times, her eyebrows pressed together in confusion. What do you mean, Daddy? She whispers. Was that the monster in your room? A heavy silence fills the room and Karis's lips quiver. Her teeth start to chatter. Suddenly, I don't want to know the answer. I just want to lie in bed and close my eyes. I want to dream of simpler times when it was Jenna, Karis, and me against the world. I want to forget that any of this has happened. I glance at my phone and check my messages again. I frown at the phone, close my messages and then reopen them. I try it once again, and then a third time before finally closing them for good. The messages from when I was outside are gone. All of them are except for a single, I'm sorry. Maybe it's best if we just call it a night. We were both upset, the storm caused the sounds, I reason. Tricks from the lightning outside had created a shadow. Yes, that must have been it. I reach over and switch on the lamp. Then I walk to the other side of the room and turn off the overhead light. Karis hasn't answered, but she is watching my every move. I curl up next to her and pull her into my arms. She rests her head between my chest and shoulder. I can tell the exact moment that she falls asleep. Karis's breathing deepens and her body goes limp. I stare up at the ceiling hoping, praying that all of this is a nightmare. I'm frightened to sleep, but it finds me anyway. The last of my thoughts drift to Jenna's warm eyes and kind smile. Tomorrow morning this will have all been a bad dream. Story 8, a diary telling the events happened in the 70s in the town of Fishkill has been dug up, the White Wall of Fishkill. The location of Fishkill was known as Tyranda by the Native American peoples. The name means the place where two waters meet. The following notes were compiled from a container found partially buried in garden of the Bauer family home on, address censored, road. The capsule contained several cans of beans, a hand-drawn picture of a bird and a leather-bound diary, purported to be written by local school teacher Alice Bauer from 1968 to 1976. Some parts of the text are difficult to decipher because of deliberate editing, water damage and partial burning. Transcripts of these illegible pages have been included within this document. All the addresses written in the notes have been censored in the following document. September 3, 1976. Dear Diary. I feel bad I haven't written in you for so long, even though so much has happened. Some good, some bad. I do find it cathartic, so I'm going to try and write something every day. I've been away now for 5 or 6, just over 7 years, but not much in Fishkill has changed. I miss the West Coast and sometimes find myself dreaming of flying back, but it's good to be here for Dad. I wonder if someone will, text illegible, move into the city. I'll stay for as long as I can. My brother Petey is 37. He's a little balder, text illegible, and a little bigger, just as tall as always. He's so sweet, and he loves me being here. He likes to feed the birds in the garden now, and he's learnt a few of their songs by heart. Dad says he can even do simple math these days, which is amazing. He counted 4 starlings today, 2 bluebirds and 1 house sparrow. I managed to get my old job at the school back, text illegible, as a teaching assistant, but that will do me fine for now. Today I am going to read Petey some of my old poems and see if I can show him how to write one. Things in the house. Dad misses Mom a lot, but I guess we all do. The autumn air is arriving and things are getting colder. I start work tomorrow. Excited to wear Mom's old sweaters. Talk soon, Alice 30. September 6, 1976. Dear Diary. Sorry for not writing for a few days. Dad has driven out of town again to play organ for St. Joachim Church. It is for the funeral of another priest he knew, the one who baptized me. It's in Beacon, next to the restaurant we used to go to with Aunt Margaret. I've got Petey some binoculars from the store so he can see the birds up close without them getting scared. Everyone in the store remembered me from years ago and all asked after Petey, which was nice. So nice to be back at school again, but there is a sickness going around the school. Text illegible, I hope I don't catch it. But it is sad because a few kids are missing from class every day, text illegible, contagious. It could be the weather, or maybe just a virus. I went to the wine bar on, address censored, the other night with one of the supply teachers, and I sold a guy called Steve. He was very dull. Maybe boring or just nervous to be on a date. I felt bad saying goodbye to him, but maybe I'm not ready to move on. Maybe it's text illegible. The pond got so icy that it's easy enough to step on. I keep telling my brother not to go near it, but he's so hard to watch sometimes. The newspapers say some of the roads out of town are closed due to traffic accidents, so hopefully my dad won't get stuck. Talk soon. Alice X. September 8, 1976. One weird thing I thought I'd write about. I had one dream the other night, really vivid. I dreamt I was floating, drifting through a really old house made of burnt wood. Like a black barn house. I could smell cigarette smoke. And there was a tall man there, very still, sitting on an old rocking chair. He had a white sort of handkerchief over his head, so I couldn't see his face. Like that, painting, almost. He told me that soon the school will be closed. His voice was so gentle, like an old man and a child speaking at once. I woke up all sweaty with my heart pumping. And PT was there, sleepwalking again. Old habits die hard. I think I'll sleep with the light on from now on. Maybe I should say something also. Yesterday, PT counted one starling today and one bluebird. He wants the sparrows to come back. Love, Alice. September 13, 1976. Text illegible, and got back from the church beacon a few days later than he said. Dad had to stay on for another funeral for the wife of his friend, a man who taught him to play organ. Text illegible. Since then Dad has been totally out of it. Tried to ask, he was real sad when he got back. Really tired and just not himself. Now he can't eat or drink water. Has a horrible temperature, with text illegible. The doctor said that he might have the flu that's been going round, but Dad is in his 70s now, so it's hitting him hard. Hope everything calms down soon. Some of the kids from school have been put in the hospital. PT is real sad because the birds aren't coming round to the garden. He counted only one starling yesterday, but it had died by the tree. I don't think he understands that Dad is getting worse. I had another dream again. I was in the old barn, but the man's chair was empty. Everything echoed like being deep in a cave. Bye for now, Alice. Unknown date, 1976. Dad in, censored, hospital now, where they can take better care of him. PT spends all his time in the garden waiting for the birds. Which is nice because I get to tend to the flowers, but I haven't seen a bird in weeks since the starling and, text illegible, folk people have started to leave Fishkill, but nobody's quite sure why. I think it could be financial, but there is the fear of the illness as well. It's like when animals flee an earthquake, everyone packing their bags. Text illegible. God. This has been the strangest month of my life. Everything feels like it is moving so fast. Speak soon. A. B. October 2nd, 1976. Dear Diary. There have been 6 fires in town over the last few days. Buildings and rooftops just bursting into flame. Nobody knows why, and nobody has been hurt, but arson has been suggested in the paper. Who would do such a thing in Fishkill? It's too cold for the sun to do it. I'm going to. They have found 6, text illegible, vehicles on the roads out of town, just abandoned. I went to a meeting at the church. They are trying to raise money to fix the clock on the town hall, as it stopped working last Sunday. Some kids at school got better, at least nice to see them happy. We made cards for the sick ones. Had another long, strange dream the other night, but I can't remember it at all. Anyway, talk soon. October 10th, 1976. The strangest thing is happening. First the phone lines stopped working all over the town, just cut out completely. Glenham were the first to report it, now beacons are down too. But just this morning, people can't seem to get out of the edges of Fishkill. Text illegible. It's so bizarre. About 10 or 15 minutes out of town, in any direction, that is where this thing happens. When they drive or walk onto the roads, or into the fields, they feel sick and nauseous. They tried taking the boats out too, got the same thing. Text illegible. At first I thought it was in their heads, you know. I tried to walk past the gas station near Van Wyck Meadows. Text illegible. October 11, 1976. The more you go the further the headache gets, you start to puke and shake. I ran back. Text illegible. Some people, we think, died trying to get out. Text illegible. Now they lay dead in the hills. Or asleep. I used binoculars to see a body of a man. I didn't recognize them. At the church they are calling the feeling a name, the white wall. Text illegible. Who are thinking it's a gas leak from the ground, or dust from the radiation. Text illegible. I don't know how to tell. The kids in my class drew pictures of their dreams. One boy called Oscar drew one that was kind of scary. It was a man with a face like a tablecloth, a little like the one in my dream. I think the children feel very stressed and confused, but I hope their parents keep driving them to school. I have been storing food in the basement. I wonder if the neighbors are doing the same. Date unknown, 1976. I fell asleep early and dreamt of that man in the barn again. He told me to dig a hole somewhere in the ground, a deep hole. PT very scared of the panic in town, but trying to keep him inside. Text illegible. Everyone so scared that the wall will get closer. Some think it already has but not sure why. What is happening? All we can do is pray, but I wonder sometimes if God is listening. Alice Bauer. October 15, 1976. Dear Diary. I started smoking again. I woke up in the morning to see all my plants had died, wilted and rotten. They closed up the school yesterday, until further notice. The letterbox people printed out these maps, drawn out to show where not to go. To show where the wall is. People worried about food getting scarce, not many farms with crops near town. The shop's name censored, has been robbed, most stores now empty. Some folk holding their guns in public, so dangerous. Love, Alice. October 19, 1976. Text illegible, though some good news. The church trying to tell people to ration, but not helping. There was a mass prayer today with lots of people turning out, many people crying. Hospital said something wrong with Dad's stomach, but he is drinking water again. A woman I knew from school gave me a bottle of wine, which is helping as I write. Text illegible. No word from the senator, mayor and police trying to keep order, doing their best. It was good to feel together in this. Text illegible. With everyone at church. I want to believe again. PT has started to scream in the night, but hope when Dad comes back it will stop. Faith, AB date unspecified, 1976. Had a dream about the handkerchief man. He told me to watch for a white light in the sky. I woke up to find someone threw a rock through the window with a message, but I can't work out what it says. I cried for a little while, but trying to stay strong. Playing games with PT. Love, Alice. October 23, 1976. I am broken. I went to the hospital. My dad passed this morning, as suddenly as Mum. It was merciful. Text illegible, said he died peacefully. They said his stomach was full of cysts that became infected and poisoned his blood. I didn't understand that the hospital was attacked by a mob for its medical supplies just the next day. So at least he was spared from that. I am sad PT didn't see him before he went. Still no birds in the garden. Run out of wine and gas now. Low. Trying to arrange funeral but hard without phone line. Will I be looking after PT on my own? Alice. October, date unspecified, 1976. Someone broke into the house while PT was here. They took everything they could, but luckily I padlocked the basement. They wrecked the place looking for stuff, fridge completely smashed. They painted some kind of symbol on the wall, like an eye. PT was sleeping and didn't wake up, which I am glad about. I could kill anyone who the police can't stop the gangs now, they just walk about the streets like animals with masks, hoods and rifles all hours of the day. Many people shot, cops scared. Some officers are begging for supplies. I'm afraid for PT and me. I can't protect him when he's not with me. There are more dead people in the meadows and more abandoned cars. Text illegible, talk soon. October 29, 1976. It has started to rain non-stop, very cold. We are running out of food, text illegible, got some handouts from church today. I saw a woman in town walking naked. She was covered in strange lumps. Wanted to stop to help her but was afraid of leaving Petey alone at the house, and masked people were surrounding her. Need to ration better or ask around, anyone who knows Dad or remembers me. Should write list of addresses. Put bullets in Dad's rifle, have it by bed. No dreams lately, but started to dig hole in garden. Had that dream again. This time I was in the barn, but the man was nowhere to be seen. Dad's funeral tomorrow. Love. Unspecified date, 1976. John Bassett, censored address, send letter. Wendy and Robert White, censored address, press buzzer 6 times. Al Thompson, censored address, basement level. Morris Trumbull, censored address. October 30, 1976. The funeral today was horrible. It rained non-stop. I could hear so many screams from the town. Some religious groups are chanting things. They buried my father in a cheap casket as that was all they had left. Even the funeral homes were robbed lately. I managed to ask the names and addresses of a few of Mom and Dad's friends. Some say they can give us, text illegible, few cans of food. They are very scared too. Many of them have lost relatives to the stomach cysts. They think it's something to do with the wall. I didn't take Petey with me and I got home pretty quickly. Before it gets dark I am putting up the barbed wire on the fence. October 31, 1976. It was Halloween today. I remember when I used to go trick-or-treating with Dad and Petey on this street. Now people are locked away in their homes. I got a letter from Mr. Kelly who lives across the street that there was a huge plane crash outside of, censored name. I think the wall has got closer like people say, because some areas like the shopping mall at Baxter Hill are out of bounds. Petey sad because he's always hungry. I dug deeper in the garden and I think I've found something. It's raining too hard so I'll keep going tomorrow. A. B. November 2, 1976. Blackout or something, the electricity has now cut out. Luckily we have church candles in the basement. I dug into that hole in the garden and found a big metal case which was sealed really well. My dream was right. It took me over an hour to smash it open. It is full of tinned food, maybe 100 cans. Enough to last us a good few months. Petey very happy, and together we draw pictures of the birds. He keeps me going. The sun shined through the rain today and made a rainbow over the forest. I miss Dad so much. Love, Alice. November 11, 1976. Last night, at 3 a.m., someone broke in through the garden window. Turned out it was that guy Steve from the school. He looked desperate, disgusting, said he was looking for food. His face was painted with white powder. I told him if he didn't leave I'd kill him. I pointed the gun in his face and made him climb back over the barbed wire. I didn't feel like myself, but I felt good to protect my house. I need more bullets soon and got to fix the window up with some kind of grate. Gonna send a letter to Mr. Kelly? I hope the man in my dreams comes back. November 16, 1976. This town is disgusting. People are feral animals. The things I see them do. I can't sleep anymore. There is no community, just evil and survival. I wish Dad was here. I will go to church and get more supplies. The wall is what some of us deserve, but not all. Please God, come back to us. Alice Bauer. November 23, 1976. I haven't written in a while. My watch broke. Without the time, things feel very confusing. The rain has got through the roof again. A couple have moved into our house with their daughter Iris. Their names are Larry and Jody Paxton. I saw them at the church when I was trading for more bullets. I trust Jody, she has a good heart. Some of the gangs have seized control of the barter. Women are selling themselves for food rations, which is so terribly sad. For a second at night I saw something in the distance, a kind of white light. November 28, 1976. The wall has got even closer, taking in some buildings north of, road name censored, it makes no sense. I'm scared it's gonna go through the garden. I watched a group of people throw a man past the border, text illegible, he couldn't run back, text illegible, vomited blood, like his body was being crushed inside, text illegible, like he was in slow motion, like time on the other side is different. I feel like I'm going crazy. Everyone rioting, starting fires in the streets and in buildings. People eating dogs, cats. We have to defend the house almost every night now, but Larry is good with the rifle. God bless us. December, unspecified, 1976. I can't breathe. I had the bad dream last night and now PT has run away. When I woke up in the night, he was gone. I think he went looking for Dad, text illegible, should have told him, maybe he figured it out, text illegible, going with Larry to try and find him somehow, text illegible, to God we make it back safely, text illegible, he, text illegible, Dream Man told me that there was a way out of the wall. I wish. Date unspecified, 1976. Text in the following passages are rendered illegible by extensive water damage and burn marks. Can't find. Saw burning bodies crucified by the library. Altars. Made like scarecrows. Rib cage. Heard a story, but couldn't. Burning like witches. The wall. Date unspecified, 1976. Note, the handwriting in this note looks distinctly different from Alice Bowers. People like tribes in town, they wear the white cloths like in Dream. Many people see him. He asks them to kill. Snow is in the air. People eating women. The headless god in soil. Date unspecified, 1976. Saw the white lights fish kill on fire. Faceless boy. Animals without skin. The creator testing the damned. The gods are testing. Date unspecified, 1976. 3 dreams all of death and rebirth. Must escape. Must leave town in time. Binoculars. For the lights. Date unspecified, 1976. The following passage is the final page in the diary. It includes a crudely drawn map of, areas name censored, roughly corresponding to a small area of woodland. Burying this in box. Jody dead. If PT finds. We have left 3 cans of food for you. We are going to find the road out of Fishkill. We dream of the barn. Alice B. Story 9, The Magic Shirt. 6 weeks ago, my life changed. I know it's for the better, but others think it is for the worse. It all started with a shirt from a thrift shop. I know, roll your eyes. A shirt? But, listen to me. Yeah. It made my life happy. Just listen. My friend Rhonda is a crazy antique shopper. She obtained this straight from her grandfather, or Pawpaw as she calls him. He is an old, tough farmer and a Baptist minister who still owns the first car he ever purchased. Upon walking onto their farm, you'll see new equipment, farming tools from yesterday, posters, oil cans, old signs and anything else that the TV show American Pickers would love to buy. She and I take turns in choosing what to do on the weekends when our boyfriends are working at US Army National Guard, and it was her week to choose what we would do. I knew what that meant. Countless hours of walking around Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge looking for old stuff to buy which would make her sweet Pawpaw happy to see his granddaughter following in his footsteps. After about 4 hours going from shop to shop in the blazing heat, I warned Rhonda this was the last stop. I was hungry and tired and had enough of looking at old antique furniture and used things. I nonchalantly walked around the last shop we were to visit, as she made her way toward the section which held old postcards and papers when this turquoise, beaded blue shirt caught my eye. The color vibrant, the size mine exactly. It held intricate beadwork which I have never seen. I loved it. The beads formed unusual but purposeful shapes, but I have never bought anything from a second-hand shop. I placed the hanger holding the shirt back onto the rack when Rhonda came up. Wow! That is some shirt, she said and continued, it's interesting. Look at the beadwork. What are those symbols? I laughed and replied, I'm sure they have no meaning other than cheap goods from overseas. She frowned and took the shirt off the rack and claimed, You should get it, she said as she held it up to me, and continued, the color is perfect for you. I rolled my eyes. She continued, stop being so stuck up. It is okay to own a shirt that was worn by someone else. It is about time you buy something. You recycle everything, so why not clothes? I had to admit I loved the color and the patterns. I took the shirt and we made our way to the register. A month passed, and Rhonda and I spoke again about plans for the weekend. It was my turn. We were going to a 5D video shootout where we could conquer zombie skeletons. You ever going to wear the shirt you bought? She asked. What shirt? The colorful one from the resale store. I know it is thrown in the corner of the room with other clothes. I laughed. Okay. I will wash it and wear it, but this is my weekend. Video game shooting and beer. I am aware, she commented. Rhonda came and off we went. I felt amazing that day. Rhonda commented that I looked beautiful. I felt it. The shirt made me look hot. Off to the castle we went for 5D video game play where I took first place, then off to eat lunch where I won a free lunch for us. Then, off to get some new juice for my vape and the owner gave it to me for free. Damn, girl, she said, this is your day. It's the shirt, I said. She laughed but I knew it was true. I don't know how I knew that, but I did. The weeks following were long but true. I won $5,000 on a lotto ticket, got a promotion, the owner of the house I rented passed away and left me the house and all his belongings in his will. This all sounds great but there is one problem. I haven't taken off the shirt. My boyfriend complained he was sick of it. In fact, he broke up with me. He spilled beer on my shirt one night and I will admit, I lost it. He thinks I am crazy. I have been called down to personal at work and they offered me financial assistance as they think I am poor, as I wear the same shirt every day. I am not that poor. One day, I took a chance at Rhonda's insistence and took off the shirt. I felt anxious and freaked out, but I needed to prove it to myself that this shirt, this blue shirt from a resale store, was my guardian angel. I will never do that shit again. I got burned while cooking breakfast, stepped on my cat when getting ready for work and a tree fell in my yard. I know why. That was 6 months ago. Rhonda does not talk to me anymore. She betrayed me by sending my parents over to my house to check on me, claiming something is wrong, but nothing is wrong. When I lie in bed at night, I often dream of shirt and beautiful beads becoming one with my skin. I desire it so much. I want that beautiful material to be part of me. But, today is stressful. I have many sick and vacation days from work and took one today. I had no choice. I really didn't. I pulled a string on my shirt and the beads fell all over the floor. My knees are a little bloody from falling on the hardwood floor to gather them, but I believe I have collected them and have the string in my hands. I am waiting for the seamstress to come and fix my shirt. I am so glad she could come on such short notice. She will be here in 20 minutes. I cannot wait. Story 10, something in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania is pretending to be human. A gray cloud has been hovering over Pennsylvania for the last 2 weeks. And I mean that in the most literal sense possible. The rain began before Labor Day and hasn't let up since. The story I'm about to tell you is true and also a warning. Due to circumstances beyond my control, as you will come to find out, I've been told that I may not be the most reliable source. But bear with me. Last weekend I was home alone. A few college brothers and I rent a house just off of the main street in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. The homes in the area tend to have a somewhat shoddy exterior, old steel and wood porches that fawn out over the sidewalk like crooked teeth. But the insides almost always have a quaint coziness, and ours was no different. Like I said, it had been raining non-stop for days. My roommates had gone on an impromptu weekend trip to the Jersey Shore to get away from it all. P.S. It was raining there too. I love them, but they're idiots. I found myself on this particular lazy, wet afternoon with nothing to do and nowhere to go. Me, being the person I am, decided to take a peek through one of the many dating apps that have eaten up the memory on my old iPhone 5. About 2 months ago was the last time I had a real boyfriend. Of course, he decided he liked girls again and that was the end of that. Ever since, my dating life has become something of a free-for-all for lack of a better term. Such is life. Shitty, terrible, awful, unfulfilling life. But I digress. I ended up going with Grindr, the perennial favorite. The app sprung to life and I was greeted by the usual hodgepodge of faceless, headless torsos of mostly straight guys just looking to get off. I knew the thirst well myself. Within minutes, I was chatting it up with a few choice dudes, nothing too serious, nothing too salacious. This is actually the interesting part, looking back. I was texting 3 different guys, having blocked the 2 dick pics that appeared without so much as a WhatsApp. And I settled on Einar without even thinking about it. Einar. I think it was the name, really, just something different and unusual. He was tall, not classically handsome, but there was something. I don't know. It was the eyes, I think. A cliché, I know, but something about his eyes. I just couldn't say no. He told me he was on Main Street, all alone at an outdoor bar. I somehow didn't think anything of this despite the rain. He was just looking for some company, nothing serious. So I texted back that I would be there in 10 minutes, just like that. You know, it's funny, again, thinking back on the weirdness of it all. I barely remember putting on my shoes, grabbing my hoodie. I don't even recall the walk. All of a sudden I was there, just standing there in the rain, the usual semi-drunken crowds of Saturday evening on Main Street Pville surging around my body. I was standing before one of the countless bars that line the street from one end to the other. Had Einar named the place I was supposed to go to? I couldn't remember. Surely he had to. How did I get there? I looked at the recently renovated old bar before me, the patrons scrunched into the back portion, under the awning and away from the rain. In the far back, I could make out a fat white guy pivoting around, working a pair of steel drums, belting out a Marley cover that actually didn't sound half bad all things considered. There was a light crash of thunder that muted both the heavy conversation and the music, but only for a moment. "Hey," Einar called. It was practically a whisper, but I still heard it, clear as a bell, despite the crowd and the rain and the elongated, low rumble from the grey sky above. There he sat. All alone, just like he said, at the outdoor bar that perched to the right of the building itself. He was the only one, of course, there wasn't even a bartender. He seemed a little hunched. Crooked? That sounds weird, I know, but it's the best way I can describe him. Again, not bad looking, but almost as if his skeleton was just a half-inch too big for his body. The drops fell lightly upon him, the bars of the overhead open awning not really doing much of anything to stop the rain. From above and to the sides, he was illuminated by the old-fashioned style Christmas lights that snaked around the walls as well as the bar top itself, casting a muted, almost sickening orange glow upon the lone drinker. "Hey," Einar said again as I found myself approaching him. "Hey." I responded quietly. "Nice night," he remarked as he patted the empty, wet seat next to him. Night. It was night, the sky now a completely rain-soaked black canvas above us. I remember at this point feeling that first pang of caution in my gut as something warm suddenly coursed through my body. Was I drunk? Impossible, I hadn't had a single drop. I certainly felt like it though. Einar smiled and I dismissed the caution immediately. He handed me a can, it was Dogfish Sequench. A relatively new beer in the area and my favorite of the season, thanks. I smiled as I slid into the wet seat next to him. Drops continued to fall upon us, the Christmas lights casting a warm amber glow upon the bar top that reflected in my glasses. I went to remove them and Einar reached out, stopping me. Before I knew it he was cupping my cheek, and before I knew that, he had kissed me. I wouldn't say I'm particularly bashful about who I am. My friends are aware of my preference, as is most of my family, on one side anyway. Even so, I tend to keep the PDA to a dull raw. But here I was, before all these people, kissing a strange man I said all of 2 words to in person. And yet, I was blushing. Really blushing. And I'll keep the intimates to myself, but I was suddenly filled with that same old hunger. You know the one? Maybe not. Behind us, within the bar itself, a few patrons noticed. I heard a couple girls in a large group give a long oar followed by a snicker or two from the guys. I was in a bit of a haze when Einar pulled away from me and looked at them, the group in the bar. With an abrupt halt, all noises ceased except the falling of the rain and the distant reggae music. "Wanna get out of here?" he asked me. "Yes," I heard myself say. "Not yeah, not sure. Yes. Period, definitive." I grabbed Einar by the hand and we began to move through the bar and out into the rainy streets. It was really falling now, sending crowds of bar hoppers indoors. A flash of lightning illuminated the streets as we crashed through puddles on our way back to the house roommates. Einar asked as we got to the door. "Not tonight," I said with obvious lust in my eyes. That pang from earlier had completely faded away. I was definitely ready for this. Einar smiled as we bounced through the front door. He wrapped his arms around my smooth body, kissing me with a passion I hadn't experienced in months. Intertwined, we moved throughout the house and towards the door to my basement bedroom. "Down here?" Einar smiled. "Down there," I said. And that warmth from earlier filled me once more. And like it does every single goddamn time the awful hunger strikes, things got a little blurry. I do remember the look on Einar's face. I always remember the look on their face, unfortunately. Those same wide, frightened eyes. The look of surprise as my hands shove against them, as they tumble backwards down the stone steps leading to the basement. I always gag next. Just before I completely black out. I hear them scream and I feel my jaw begin to do that goddamn thing it always does. Disconnects? That's what it feels like. The blood begins to pour from my cheeks and I feel the warmth of it as my jaw extends itself into that same old brutal, primal shape. There's more screaming, and then things go completely blank. When I come to, I'm always the same, naked, alone, curled up and covered in blood, surrounded by all those parts, the ones that just wouldn't stay down. I can see the remains of Einar's pulpy body resting in one of the other nests that sit upon the cool basement floor. Across from Einar is the ex and that bitch he took off with, now a jumble of parts along with last week's meal, some fucking scene twink that just couldn't take no for an answer. The roommates were still working on that one. "Why do we do it alone?" I once asked one of the roomies. "Wouldn't it be easier as a group?" He merely shrugged. I rose from my own nest, now quite satiated. My jaw ached but had reverted to its, well, normal form. I looked at Einar. The sadness was always next and I despised that part most of all. I hate the blackouts. I really do. And if you're wondering what the hell I am? Good question. But this is your only warning, I'm not human. And if you're out there on a Saturday night, looking for a good time in rainy Oakville, PA, just be careful. Because I'm out there. And I'm always hungry. Story 11, My Best Friend. My best friend Haley was killed when I was 15. She was reported missing for 6 days before a dog walker found her hand protruding from the undergrowth that bordered our chocolate box village. We live in a pretty small, tight-knit community, so news spreads fast around here. The day after her body was found, the school held a huge assembly for the students, staff and parents who wanted to attend. It was a rushed, lazily thrown together memorial service that they used to introduce a town curfew to everyone under 18 years old. It was shameful. But at least they got the message across. Some students were trying to hold in their sobs during Haley's service and others were comforting them. You could literally feel the despair and the turmoil in the room. I heard people, even those that barely knew her, questioning if they could have done something, or how they could have been in her position. Rumors had already started developing about the cause of death. Natural causes? She was 15 and in near perfect health. Suicide? Nothing to suggest it, nothing found near her body. Accidental death? Surely someone would have reported it, or at least heard something that night. The word on everyone's lips at that point: murder. I remember that feeling of absolute emptiness that smothered me when I was told that her body had been found in some desolate place, dumped as though she meant nothing, as if she was nothing. I remember friends and family members checking up on me, asking how I was, assuming I was so shock-ridden that I was practically catatonic. It was a hard thing for me to process. She was my best friend. Haley was known around the village as a sweet, smart girl who wanted to be a landscaper and property developer, following in her father's footsteps. How ironic that she was dumped in some filthy undergrowth and left to rot. A week or so after her body was discovered, the rumors died down and people were eager to know exactly what had happened to her, but the police didn't have any leads. We all knew the same thing by that point, that she'd been lying there for 6 days, alone and left for dead by an unknown assailant. What we didn't know was that she was still alive when she was dumped, struggling to breathe beneath the damp leaves and sharp branches, desperate for someone to notice her in the dark brush and the pouring rain. It's sad, really. It was all preventable. Haley didn't see it coming, but I did. She played with fire far too much and never thought she'd get burned. Of course, there are some things I'll never share, including the reason why I killed her. I'll let the police figure that one out. I'm 17 now, life goes on and things are pretty much back to normal. No one ever suspected me, and I plan to keep it that way. That empty feeling is still there, maybe it always will be. Who knows, it may go away someday. If not, it looks like I'll have to find a new best friend.